Hey folks, Matt Kuda again here, and we are going to take a look today at how I configure my A7R III, my Sony A7R III for landscape photography. A little bit different from what I just showed you in the last video on birds in flight and action. Now we're going to slow down and we're going to be landscape photographers. So on the first thing you want to do is you want to hit your menu button on the back of the camera, and that brings you up to this screen here I have in front of me. Now, you also want to make sure that the first tab is selected. And down at the bottom of that first tab, you'll see a number of little squares that go across the very bottom of the screen. That tells you what sub-tab you are on within the main tab. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So if you're doing landscape photography, so that's anything on a tripod, it's anything where you're going to slow down, you're going to think about the shot for 15-20 minutes, you know, that kind of thing, then you're going to want to take a look at these settings I have for you today. So first thing up, file format. I use RAW, and I highly encourage everybody that does landscape photography to use RAW. You say, Matt, why do I want to use RAW? What is RAW? RAW, you can think of RAW as an electronic negative. It is a file that is very flat, doesn't have a lot of contrast, doesn't have any of the settings applied to it yet. But because of that, it's very flexible. And so when I'm in my image editing software, and you will need image editing software if you are using the RAW format, which Sony has one for free, so you can do that. File format RAW. So what else does that do for me? It allows me to have and take advantage of the massive amount, the difference between the highlights and the shadows, or what we call the dynamic range, will be fully available to me in post-production when I'm actually editing this. And so I can pull back those blown out highlights. I can raise my my shadow areas up, and you just can't do that with a JPEG. I mean, you can do it to some degree, but not really. A JPEG is very limited. It is a lossy type of file, whereas a RAW is lossless. It has all the information in it. So again, use RAW. The RAW file type. This is important, although not ridiculously important. It is important in what I just talked about, which is dynamic range. There are two options here, compressed and uncompressed. So if I use uncompressed, I will get a much better range, more data in the photograph, much better dynamic range. So when I'm shooting landscape photography, I want to select uncompressed. You always want to use uncompressed. Okay? If you are a JPEG shooter, which I discourage against, but if you are a JPEG, you have different quality here. You have extra fine, fine, and standard. You want to use extra fine. This camera has 42 megapixels of information. So that's roughly 42 megabytes of information. And what that does is it gives you a lot of detail. It gives you a lot of cropping space because of all those pixels put on that sensor. You are going to have a little more noise in a camera like this. And so, again, it's a great landscape camera. JPEG image size. You can choose large, medium, or small. If you are a JPEG shooter, if you are not a JPEG shooter, please select large. Aspect ratio. Okay, the aspect ratio for most photographs is going to be 3:2. Yes, we're seeing more 16:9 ratio, which is basically your standard movie format. We're seeing that more and more these days. So, you know, you may want to experiment with that. But I usually will crop and post to get 16:9. Okay, APSC Super 35. In this case, we really just want to leave this. We don't really want to use APS-C mode. Not for landscapes generally. There may be some use cases that may come up, but generally no. Okay, the next sub-tab. Color space. If you are shooting RAW, you really don't need to worry about color space. If you are shooting in JPEG, I am going to recommend that you choose Adobe RGB. Adobe RGB used to be not as common. It used to be all the browsers didn't support it, and well, that's all changed now. They all support Adobe. Maybe a couple really insignificant ones don't. sRGB is the old variant, but I'm just going to leave mine sRGB just simply because I don't care. I'll change stuff in post. Lens compensation. Yeah, we're not going to worry about that. Let's go back. Next sub-tab, third sub-tab over. Drive mode. Okay, we really don't need continuous shooting here. Continuous shooting is for continuous shooting is just for when you are sorry guys, get off that for a second. I'll show you that later. Continuous shooting is really for like action sports, wildlife, things like that. That's what I showed you on the last video. We don't want that here because we're doing landscapes. So we're going to take that back to, well, first of all, low. If you do want to keep the mode on, go ahead and set it on low. However, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it at high on here. I'm going to go up 1 to single shooting, because single shooting is really what you want here. So change it to single shooting. Okay. Hit the menu button, go back. Do we want to bracket settings? Okay, this is a personal choice. It used to be in days past we would always bracket our shots. So what bracketing is you would take your normal image and then you would take one stop brighter and one stop darker. And that was because we shot with slide film and we shot with negative film. And even with slide film, it would be even crazier because slide film was so sensitive. I would end up basically bracketing, plus 1/3, minus 1/3, and then plus 1 stop, minus 1 stop. So I had these big brackets going on. So yes, you can use the bracketing if you want to. Here's one that does 2, or no, that's self timer. We don't care about that, but let me go back there for a second. This is self timer bracketing, by the way. I forgot to mention that. So this is for when you do not have a cable release attached. So let's just say we wanted to use this. What it will do is every 2 seconds it's going to bracket a shot. Okay, every 5 seconds, every 10 seconds. So we're not going to make any changes here because we don't use this. Pixel shift multi-shoot. Now, what this does, this is a feature that Sony came out with, and I applaud them for trying to do something like this. It's gotten some very mixed reviews, but essentially what it does is it will shift the pixels so that it creates a larger image and a more detailed image. This sounds great, but in practice for landscape shooters, you're not going to use that. Architecture, you might need it or might use it, but for moving landscapes where trees are blowing and water's moving and things like that, you're not going to use pixel shift. I think it's cool, but it has very limited use in this use case. Okay, we're going to skip over the recall and memory. That's going to be a separate video. The media, it doesn't really matter in this case because we are shooting landscapes. I generally would just leave it on slot 1. That's your main slot. That's your Type 2 SD card Type 2 slot. But you can change it to be slot 2 if you want to. It's up to you. The fourth sub tab now. I'm not going to worry about anything here. You can do interval shooting here. So, you know, that's for doing things like, you know, intervalometer type shooting where you're trying to do, you know, these massive, you know, 200 shot movies basically of the scene that are shot, you know, 1 frame at a time. So we're not really gonna worry about that here. If you, that may be a separate video coming up, but this is just for general landscape photography. I don't consider those type of images general landscape photography. Okay, the 5th sub tab, focus mode. Okay, we don't really want continuous AF here, so let's change that, and I'll tell you why. Why wouldn't you want continuous AF? Well, imagine if you're continuously focusing on this on your scene, and your camera moved or something like that. It could easily get out of focus. So what I do is I either will use manual. Excuse me. I will either use manual focus, or I will use single shot AF. And that's what I'm going to recommend here. Single shot AF. So now if I focus, whoop, there we go. Focused on that mug right there. Which, to be quite honest, ooh, let's make it a high key shot. What do you think? I think a high key mug looks good. Nah, I don't know about that, but let's just leave it. Okay. Priority set in AFS and AFC. I'm going to leave that because we're in single shot AF mode. It doesn't apply. Focus area. Now, this you definitely want to change for landscapes. Focus area is not going to be wide. It's going to be doop, doop, doop. Flexible spot. Probably medium, although I will use small also. So you can see what that does here. It allows me to move my joystick around. Right? So suppose I just wanted to focus on the handle of this cup, right? I'm going to move that into place, and I am going to focus on the handle. And now the handle's in focus. Notice how because I'm shooting at f1.8, notice how now the cup went out of focus, right? And I could easily switch back to the cup and focus. You see how that's working? Now, if that was a rock, for example, you know, that's a perfect example. You might have a rock in your foreground that you want to be sharp, and then you want hyperfocal distance into the background, so you would shoot at like f16 or f22 or do a focus stack or something like that. So definitely want to use flexible spot. Focus settings on that. Oh, whoops. Yeah, we don't need to worry about any of that. Okay. I always hit that focus setting. I did that in the last one. Okay, let's go on to the next tab. AF Illuminator. You can turn that off or on. Just leave it on auto. Center lock on AF is off. Face and eye detect. We want that off. If that's on, please turn it off. Because most of the time we're not going to have faces in our landscape, so we don't want that. Okay, AF track sensitivity does not apply here, so we're going to skip that. AF with shutter. I do not use AF with shutter. I use back button focus. If you are using AF with shutter, this needs to be on, right? And so now if I come in here, it will focus when I hold the button halfway down. And I can go over here to the handle and do the same thing. All right, that's how that works. Turn that back off so I don't confuse myself. Whoops. Okay, the next sub tab, pre-AF, that should be off. AF area registration, don't really need that for landscape in my opinion, so we just leave that off. Let's keep going. Next tab. Whoops. Okay, now we're into video. Okay, we're, you know, if you want to do video, this particular video is not going to be about video, so I'm just going to skip this stuff. This is about still landscape photography. Okay, there are some things on this tab you may want to be aware of. I'm not going to go into them in detail in this video because they're not required for landscape photography. But you can, and I do use this occasionally, especially if I'm doing, you know, selfies and things like that. But you can set up your smartphone as a wireless trigger, and it does work. It's a little clunky, I gotta be honest with you. I don't like Sony's implementation of this. But to do that, you would go down here to the control with smartphone setting, and you know, create your connection and all that kind of stuff. It does work, but it does take some time to set up, and it's a pain in the tail. So we're not going to do that in this video. In here also are your Wi-Fi settings, where you know, you can actually use those settings to transfer images, Bluetooth for like wireless Bluetooth and all that kind of stuff. You can use that here. So they have a lot of features in here on the networking side. You know, Bluetooth remote control. Here, I was just talking about that. You know, you can turn that on. Sony has its own, I forget the model number, but they have their own Bluetooth remote that I've heard is pretty good. I don't have it, but it's a little overkill for what I do, but I've heard it's pretty cool. Okay, we're going to skip over playback. Yeah, let's skip over all that kind of stuff. Yep. Okay, wait a minute, what was that for a second? It was okay. Really need to do a video on the intervalometer in here because that's kind of cool too. But I don't do a lot of time lapse photography, but it is kind of cool. I probably should do more of it, to be honest. Is there anything in here? You know, cleaning mode, again, I talked about that in my last video. You know, excuse me, that is kind of important. Sorry, you know, my sinuses are horrible with this horrible pollen today. It's awful. But anyway, the cleaning mode works. Now, touch operation, I guess I should talk about cleaning mode a little bit. Cleaning mode, when you go into that, it allows you to turn your camera on and off, and it will go through this whole, you know, shaking of the sensor and all this kind of crazy stuff. So that's nice. By the way, I should also note that Sony cameras are notorious for collecting dust because the sensor is so close to the flange on the you know, where you mount your lens. I mean, it's horrible. But I mean, that's just a trade-off for having a you know, a mirrorless camera, really. Touch operation, I'll leave that on. You can do touch focus. Unfortunately, with this particular camera, you cannot do touch. Like, I can't move around this screen you're looking at right now with touch, which is absolutely ridiculous. I have no idea why they did that. Okay, the next tab over on setup 3, touch panel. Again, we're just talking about the touch panel and the pad. You can use the screen on the back for a touch panel. I do not do that, although it is set up on here for that. I don't know. My verdict's still out on that, guys. I'll just let you decide on how you wanna do that. You know, this kind of goes more into how you set up those touchpad settings. I'll let you worry about all that stuff. That could be another video even. You just don't need it You don't really worry about that for the most part. You don't worry about that with landscape photography, because most of the time you're on a tripod. You're not going to be doing any of that kind of stuff. So, okay, nothing to see there. In here under setup 5, you can set up your copyright info in here. Okay. I don't think I've done that for this camera. Oh, yeah, I did. Okay, so yeah, you can put your name in here. Okay, you can write the copyright info to on. That will write it to your file. You can set the copyright, which I did not do, so I don't know why I turned on that. I guess we can turn that back off. Display copyright info. Yeah, I don't have that in there, so hit menu. Format. Format is very important. Format is how you format your cards, right? Now I'm going to go ahead and format this because I don't have anything on these cards. So let's cancel this for a second. So in order to how you format is let's go back. Let's go back again. All right. So on the back of your camera, there's a spinny dial thing. It's down in the lower right quadrant of your camera. All you do is you select format like this with your up and down pad there, and then you hit the button in the middle. It goes in the format. That's how you do all these, by the way. I didn't think I explained that in the beginning, so I thought I would finally explain it. I'm going to go ahead and select slot 1. I don't have anything in slot 2 apparently. So all the data will be deleted. You want to format it? Yes. And then it will go in and format your memory card. Now, something you may not know about formatting memory cards. When you format a memory card, it does not delete the data on the card. And you're like, what? It doesn't? No, it basically deletes the header information for the card, for the files on that card. That basically it just tells you, it basically tells the camera, hey, you've got data on here, and this is how it's organized and so forth. So it basically removes that whole header thing. This is how most of them work anyway. It removes that header information. Your data is still on there, and slowly over time, that data gets rewritten as you take photographs. So if you're ever in a situation where you have 100 images on there, and you hit format by accident, do not keep shooting if you want to get that information off of there. If you hit that format by accident, don't think everything's lost. Take that card out, set it aside, and you can get that data back off there with certain pieces of software that they make. Certain types of software that they make, you can get that off of there. So just something to think about. File number, you can set this in here to a series. So it's going to be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you can reset it at any time with this. Okay. You can change the file name. I guess how the file name is organized, let me just say. Now this is interesting, I guess you could change this to like MAT or something, M-A-T or something like that. I mean, I don't know. I don't know why you would. I guess people have their reasons, but for me, just leave it at DSC. I mean, who cares? That's just stupid. For me, anyway. It's stupid. Okay, now in here in record media settings. Now this may be of interest to you. I can tell slot 1 that I want to record simultaneously. I want to record RAW and JPEG together. I can do the movies and the images, and I mean there's all kind of stuff that you can set up in here like that, how you want to arrange on your card. I have auto switch media set to on. What happens is, and this is kind of cool, Now, correct me if I'm wrong on this, guys, but the way I understand this is, and the way I've seen it work, is that when you have auto switch media on, so I have slot 1 right now. If I had a card in slot 2, when slot 1 filled up, it would automatically switch to slot 2. That's how I currently have it set. Okay, version setting reset. Okay, yep. All right, so we're on to the last tab. It's the star tab. I talked about this in my last video. There are things on here that I have that I think I might need while I'm shooting, and it's a quick my menu kind of system where you can easily select and add menu items here that you're going to use continuously. So what's number 1 on my list at the top? APSC. I can go into APSC mode here, or you can configure it to be on a certain button. In my case, I can go into APS-C mode just by hitting the delete button on the back of my camera, or I can come in here and hit it. So I can go, whoop, yep. Shoot, yep. Okay, pixel shift, it's off for me. I don't know why I have that on my main menu. I guess I thought I was going to try it out and I wanted it. I haven't had a chance to experiment with it yet, but, and probably never will, guys. I'll be honest with you. Silent shooting. I leave silent shooting on, and here's the reason for that. When you're shooting landscapes, the problem is you can easily get vibrations in your images, and if you leave silent shooting off, what will happen is, or what can happen is, when you have very low shutter speeds, the shutter's vibrations, the mechanical shutter vibrations, can actually cause micro vibrations in your image, and it won't be as sharp. So why not take advantage of the silent shooting mode? It's not going to be a problem when you're shooting landscapes. Okay. Steady shot. This is something I use frequently. If I'm on a tripod, I do not use steady shot. There's really no reason to. However, if I am hand holding, and it does happen, you know, some national parks do not allow tripods. Some parks, period, do not allow tripods. So this allows me to go in, turn on the 5-axis image stabilization, and then I can get away with a lot lower shutter speeds. Again, the format, I have the format in here so I can easily format my cards when I need to. On the next tab, I have the Face IAF set. So I can turn on, you know, face priority. I can turn that to on. I also have, let's go back there real quick. Come on, you silly thing. Keeps going on to APS-C mode for some reason. I don't know why. Keep putting it on and it goes out of it. I can go back and face eye detect, and I can say, I want to do animal, I want to do people. You're just not going to need that for this, but I thought I'd show it anyway. Okay, so that's all I have. I have those 2 tabs set up, I think. Let me check. Maybe I have a third one. Doop. Nope. Okay, so you know how you add these is you just click add item, and then you find something that you want in your menu. You know, maybe let me find one that's common here that you might want to add. Probably should have thought of this ahead of time, right? Instead of just like looking through each one of these images. You know, maybe you want bracket settings. You know, that's a good one. Actually, I might put that in there. Let's go ahead and add it. Let's go ahead and add that right here. So I added bracket settings. So now, you know, let's go out. So now over here in my menu 2, I've got bracket settings. Right? Bracket order. That's interesting. That's how I would want it right there. I don't bracket, like I said, I don't bracket much anymore. There's just not much reason for it. Now let's go over real quick the function button. It's on the back of your camera. What would I need to do? You know, what would I need to... Oh, it's interesting. Okay, what would I need to use function-wise in this camera? Well, first of all, I'm not going to want to be at ISO 1000 to be doing landscapes. So this image is about to get a lot darker. So what I start out with for ISO, for landscapes, is something like 100. Anything below 100 is not considered native ISOs. So, by the way, don't use auto ISO in scenics at all, period. If you're in a situation like I was a couple weeks ago photographing waterfalls, sometimes ISO 100 is not low enough. In other words, what can happen is you want to make, for instance, the water be more like cotton candy. Well, in order to do that, you can crank down your ISO to 50, right? You can't use it on silent shooting. That's the one kicker with this. So it's warning me you can't do that. That's why they're grayed out. So if you're going to use silent shooting, you have to stay with 100, but in this case. So, yeah, that's interesting. Typically, you're going to be, I would typically set the shutter speed here, and you can see it down in the left corner. I would typically set that around, 1/250th to start with. But because we want to blow that background out, let's take it down to and make our high key coffee mug. Let's take it down to like a 20th. I'm being silly, I know. 25th of a second coffee mug here. Okay, so oh wait a minute, I didn't want to do that. Sorry. Back in the functions. So I'm going to start out with ISO 100 for like 99%. If we go over this, we'll see a lot of the same settings we just set. There's drive mode. I'm in single shot drive mode because you don't need anything else, right? AFS, autofocus single. We don't need tracking or anything like that. It's just not necessary. I'm on auto white balance. Now, a word about auto white balance. Since I'm using RAW and since I'm going to do this in post, I don't worry about auto white balance at all being on. Some people may throw a fit about that. Now, one of the things you may want to do if you just don't like messing with auto white balance a lot is if you're outdoors, set it to the daylight balance, the daylight white balance. That will give you a much more film-like quality because the film, in the film days, the film was mostly, unless you got special tungsten film or something like that, film was daylight balanced. And so I have no idea why they don't come out of the box. Well, I guess I do, but I mean, sometimes it's frustrating. Some other ones you might want to consider is shade. Now, see how it made it really yellow? If you're really going for a lot of warmth in your scene, you might want to try shade. Cloudy is a really good one. I like cloudy. Personally, I prefer daylight or cloudy most of the time. The other settings here, incandescent. So see how it turned blue? It's trying to compensate for incandescent lighting. Is why it's doing that. Then you've got fluorescence, cool white. Yeah. Flash. And you can actually change the Kelvin in here manually. So if you feel like you can do that. And then there's custom white balances in here that you can set. I never do that, by the way. I like to keep it simple. I'm one of these guys that, I've been a software developer for 23 years, and all I do all day long is make everything complex, even though I try to keep it simple there too. I'm making complex things all day long. The last thing I want to do is make my camera more complex than it needs to be. So I'm probably going to use auto white balance or daylight most of the time. Why? You know, you can see the color shift there. Auto, it's more true whites. Daylight, we got a little bit of warmth being added in there. And then cloud, we got a lot more warmth. So cloud, daylight, auto white balance. Okay, we'll just leave auto on. I got no problem with auto, but it does tend to make things a little green. Whoops, I always do this. Okay, let's go back to function. I don't think there's anything else to talk about there. Okay, yeah, you can change your media in there. This over here tells me what I am on recall. So I'm on 1 right now. If I change this to 2, you can see how I have it set up for 2, and it'll take you to the screen, and then go back to 1. Okay, we've got 3 different settings in here. Isn't that cool? The A7R III is a nice professional camera, I will say. It can do most anything. Something else I wanted to talk about real quick here, guys, about this camera. This is just bonus, so you can turn it off now if you want to. I'm sorry about the coughing, guys. It's horrible. Notice how I got this set up here at the moment. If you look at that coffee cup, why does this thing keep going back to? Oh, I didn't get it back to 1, did I? Oh yeah, it overrode my settings. Sorry about that, guys. I want to show you something. Do you notice that the outer bracket around this, and then the inner, like that inner, I guess rounded corners and stuff? That's as big as your focus area is. So you only can focus within those autofocus points inside that bracket. There's a difference between this camera and the A9, or the A7 III, the A9, and the A7 IV, and so on, as they have a lot more autofocus points. So that's something to keep in mind with the A7 III. But that's all I had, really, guys. I mean, that's my settings. Again, recuperate, yeah. Again, to recap, the big ones that you need to remember. Quit it. Okay, the big ones you need to remember: shoot in RAW, shoot compressed, and make sure that your focus mode is not continuous. It's single shot. And then you can change the ISO. ISO should be down around 100 for landscape. Let's change that. This is real quick, just real quick. All right, 100. Get that exposure back up again, and that's it. That's it in a nutshell. I mean, that's your basic settings. I hope that you enjoyed this. For those that are on the audio podcast, there'll be a link in the show notes on the YouTube video, so you can go check that out after you listen to it. But there's not a whole lot to set up to do landscapes. So anyway, thanks for watching. Make it a great day, and get out there and enjoy nature. Bye-bye.